you a few points my PM argued in favour. You talk about equality and the positive social things with it, yet you haven't considered the fact that it is impractical and competition between people is rife nowadays. Full equality is an ideology that cannot work in practice, so I think we should reconsider that point. You also talked about Francois Hollande and his no to austerity, yes to growth policy. Yet you have forgotten the fact that these are simply policies he wishes to implement. They haven't been introduced yet, and there's no guarantee that they will be introduced. As we have seen in the past with prime ministers and presidents, they have made some false promises and policies which they cannot implement and are introduced due to other factors such as the no to tuition fees with Nick Clegg and the closing down of Guantanamo Bay with President Barack Obama. Okay, just to introduce a few arguments. This House argues that socialism is dead due to the fact that capitalism works better. Everything has changed since the 20th century, and the collapse of the Soviet Union exemplifies this. The Soviet Union was one of the greatest powers during the 20th century, spreading its ideology from east to west. Yet its collapse clearly showed the flaws socialism truly has economically. During the Red Scare, every nation that took up the socialist ideology declined in economic power, output fell, and general wealth and resources among citizens also fell. Why? This is because as wages for those who worked fell, so did productivity. There was no incentive to work harder and to work that extra hour, as all the work would not be rewarded. They pretended to pay us whilst we pretended to work. That's what the cry was of the socialist citizens. This clearly shows how ineffective socialism truly is and provides a strong argument to why socialism is dead in Europe. It simply would not work. Workers do not get the benefits of working hard. If they don't get the benefits of working hard, they will simply leave and move to somewhere else where socialism doesn't exist, where working actually matters and gets you somewhere. Thus, governments and parties realize they have to tailor and modify their own political ideologies to suit those that matter the most. Therefore, this House argues socialism is dead in Europe as it is economically impractical. This leads me on to my second argument. The fact that old Labour ended in 1997, which suggests socialism has been dead in UK for 15 years, and it's not just a recent thing. New Labour openly accept that socialist ideas and policies on the economy simply would not work in the 21st century as it once possibly did in the 20th century. This desire to get away from socialism as a whole can be supported by the fact that there is a consensus between the current Labour leader, Ed Miliband, and the current PM, who is also the Conservative leader, David Cameron. This can also be supported by the fact that when Labour were in power from 1997 to 2010, the gap between rich and poor widened, which is something you wouldn't expect as they are a centre-left wing party. Even now, Labour Party leader calls for responsible capitalism rather than responsible socialism and fails to show any support for socialist ideologies, even though he calls himself a socialist. This not only shows that socialism is dead in Europe, but also shows socialism as an ideology has limited credibility, as those claiming to be socialists or claiming to represent socialism show no interest in defending or pushing through the concepts. To summarise, we've looked at why the opposition have weak arguments, as they cannot provide enough evidence to suggest the policies Francois Hollande has claimed to implement will actually work. Secondly, they've also talked about equality, yet there's no proof or no actual guarantee that it actually exists or works. Okay, some of the arguments I've made include the economic demise of the Soviet Union and how that exemplified how socialism doesn't work and how previous leaders failed to live up to promises.